Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I think if you've all got your headsets there, if you want to listen. My name is Cam Davey. I'm a Senior Solutions Engineer at Acceldata. With me is Joe Murphy, who's one of our Senior Field Engineers at Acceldata, and we're here today to talk to you about how AI agents are helping you power and get your data AI ready in your pipelines. So let's level set first before we get into AI and agentic-driven data management. What is data observability? Data observability is monitoring the reliability, the quality, the general trustworthiness of your data across your data landscape and the pipelines that are moving that data. Data observability is a platform to help you detect anomalies as data lands in the landing zone, to track data, to track lineage, to track quality, to track freshness, and to reconcile and compare data across disparate data sets throughout your entire supply chain. Now, where AI starts to fit in is on the very far right-hand side, you see the consumption zone. The consumption zone is that area of your data landscape which is typically connected to your BI reports. Maybe you're doing some machine learning modeling. Well, now that also includes data that you're going to feed into your own AI machinery, if you will. So it is very important to make sure that you have that data ready for your AI needs. Now, one thing that we've found in our many years of existence in doing data observability is that we want to be able to push that observability as far left, as early as possible in this supply chain, making sure that you're examining data at that landing zone, at the ingestion point, so that you can catch those errors as early as possible in the supply chain. One of our largest customers has a rule of 10 that every time you move to the next zone in this diagram, the cost to repair those data errors goes up by an order of magnitude, a factor of 10. So if it costs you $1 at the ingestion zone, at the data sources, it's going to cost you $10, then $100, then $1,000, then $10,000. So why spend $10,000 to solve a $1 problem? So you get that observability set as early as possible on that inventory data, distribution data, et cetera. It will only make it easier to provide quality, highly reliable, highly trustable data to your AI interfaces, to your Power BI, your BI reports, your machine learning models. So we level set because data observability is the foundation for agentic data management. Now, over the years, we've certainly been able to show that there is a difference in scale and frequency in what data observability is focused on versus what, say, the data catalog or the governance applications are focused on. The governance and the catalog vendors are focused at the sort of the core totality of the data, as opposed to the individual assets. So that data in the definition of a total data landscape doesn't change as often. Whereas with data observability, we're monitoring things at a much deeper level. We're monitoring inside tables, inside views, how those changes are affecting your reports, your machine learning models, the data that you're making ready for AI. And that data can change much, much quicker. So it's important to put those checks and balances on that data as soon as possible. So you're dealing with a higher scale and a higher frequency of change. And in the data observability world, we're doing this in a comprehensive manner, not just observing, monitoring the reliability of the data, but the reliability of the pipeline and the infrastructure that's running the pipeline, as well as the users and the costs that those users are incurring by running those data pipelines. So we want you to make sure that you're using a data observability platform that's comprehensive, that has interconnected metadata with the context of the business that's using that, as well as monitoring the operational data as well. Now, data management, and specifically around data observability, is a very quick-moving industry in the sort of the data landscape. Data observability itself is really only about 6 to 7 years old as sort of a topic, if you will, especially here at Big Data London. This started many years ago with just homegrown data quality solutions, very specific, purpose-built, all built internally, but very much focused on just basic validation and basic rules. Very kind of SQL-driven. As we moved up, as times progressed, you started looking at traditional data quality software. They were prepackaged, they had cleansing models that were built into it, a lot more focused on just straight batch processing. But the main problem there was that it lacked scalability. It was, again, still scaled down for specific departmental requests of monitoring and observing that data. Then you introduce the full-scale data observability platforms where you're doing continuous anomaly detection, you're monitoring data, pipelines, users, et cetera. It's much more scalable, and it exists as kind of an operational catalog without itself being a catalog. Now, on top of all of that, now we're adding in agentic data management. So take everything that you see in that data observability column and put on top of it a layer of AI-based agents that are helping to speed up that whole process, to scale that process even further, and to make it easier for a much wider user base within your organization. Up until Agentic DM, definitely the data observability users were much more in the data engineer type of role, right? People who were familiar with the data sources, people who were familiar with how they were built, what connected to what. But when people are coming in and saying, well, my BI report is broken, I know this data is wrong, how should I fix it? Well, they're not going to be the ones that fix it, but what they do want to do is identify which data sources should be the ones that are connected to their Power BI reports. So by introducing agents and making it much more accessible for a less technical user, they have that ability to power themselves. So in looking at kind of the comparisons between governance and cataloging and observability, these are just a few things to keep in mind, right? Whereas the governance capabilities and the catalog capabilities absolutely have their strengths, but not necessarily focused on this particular slide, but in comparison with data observability is focused on showing the lineage, metadata management, and overall metadata collection, if you will, very much focused on data quality and the other policy types or the other types of checks that I mentioned, reliability checks, making sure that your data is high quality, highly reliable, that schema hasn't drifted, that the data hasn't drifted, and that as you're moving data through your supply chain, that data has not changed dramatically from one spot to the next. And being able to provide that audit and compliance, not necessarily from a security perspective, but from a data compliance perspective. In other words, my data must look like this. I want to build a rule or a policy that makes sure that my data always looks like this, and if it doesn't, let me know. That's where you get with the compliance and audit reports. So the agents are helping to cut through that complexity. Now, if you recall, I showed the one slide that had the increasing scale, right? Higher volumes of data, higher speeds. Well, that's making it really difficult now, as organizations are becoming more involved with data observability, to find the signal through the noise, right? When the data volumes were small, it's easy to find that problem, right? You've only got a few data sources, I can find where the anomalies are, no problem. We were talking with a customer that came to our booth that had over 177,000 data assets just for them alone. So imagine trying to find data anomalies across 177,000 databases in your organizations. That's very difficult. Now, we're already collecting all of this information. That's what the data observability platform is doing. It's collecting all of this metadata, it's scoring it, it's providing these dashboards that are giving you these scores about what's reliable and what is not. However, the agents are speeding up that process by allowing the users to ask simple questions, but providing profound answers to those questions by just simply searching and summarizing all of this very valuable metadata that the platform has already collected. So these agents are helping you to plan your observability process better. They're helping you to reason better, to act quicker, and to reflect and make sure that you're creating this continual loop. So that's what agentic data management is. All of this sits on top of the existing data observability platform. You've got these different engines, so a discovery engine for discovering the different data sources and the assets, a policy engine to help drive the creation of the data reliability, the trust tests that you're going to build, and an actions engine that's going to push all of these actions out to the various data assets. The orchestrator in the middle is talking to all of these very specific agents that are purpose-built for a particular task. So as you see at the top, we've got a data quality agent, a governance agent, etc. So the agent, the orchestrator in the middle, gets a request. And imagine just a chat GPT-like interface that says, what are my most problematic Snowflake tables in my whole ecosystem? Great. The orchestrator picks that up and says, that sounds like a data quality question that you're asking. It gives that to the data quality agent. It starts to investigate using all of this metadata and pumps out an answer that says, well, here, you said you were asking about Snowflake. Here are all your Snowflake assets, but here are the 5 most problematic, say, from a data quality low score standpoint. So all of these agents are referencing and collecting and navigating through all of this very valuable metadata that you have underneath the hood that the data observability platform is collecting. So it really is helping to cut through all of that noise and produce the signal that you're asking for. Okay, so I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague Joe, and he's going to walk you through a live demonstration of all of this.
Thanks, Cam. Oops, wrong way. Okay, so as Cam was saying, the core data observability platform is collecting information, metadata, generating signals about the reliability of data, what's happening over time. Nothing's static in your data world, so the reliability isn't static. We're measuring it constantly. Now, if I'm a business user, right, a data engineer can kind of dive into this asset, that asset. Maybe we've got an alert that said there was a problem here in my pipeline. But let's say I'm a business user, right? I'm responsible for a regulatory reporting environment, and they've built me or set up a dashboard for me that gives a score to my 15 or 20 assets that make up my environment, and I can start tracking over time how it's doing overall reliability in terms of the quality of specific assets with specific controls I told them to implement, the ability to recon that data as it moved from the sources into my reporting environment, checks for schema drift, checks for freshness, is it up to date, et cetera. So I've got an environment that's checking all the reliability of assets important to me. That's the core of the platform. And I can see from this dashboard that, the dark blue line is the overall score. It took a dive, right? Last week, I actually broke it before I came here inadvertently, but it worked out pretty well for the demo. But this is actually made up of all the different assets, and I could say, hey, I want to go look at that BigQuery table or the Kafka topic that fed it, and just kind of click in and start looking. But I'm going to do, oh, look at that, I have to log in again. Come on. I'm a Murphy, by the way, so that's my Murphy's Law on any demo. Something's going to hiccup. But I could dive in, let's just say, and start looking at the asset and diving into it. But now, since I'm not an expert in the platform, there's a lot of clicking and probing that I might do, right? Alerts will take me to sort of where the root cause is, but I'm not expert in it. So let me find it, makes me log in again. So instead, I'll go into a conversational mode, right? So here, I can just start asking a question about the platform, what I'd want to do, what I'd want to know. Now, I'll go to one that I've kind of primed a bit, but I know there's a certain assets that I saw from that dashboard that are look like they have a lower score. So I can say, hey, what policies are attached to this specific table? And the agentic system will go back and start answering me. Now again, this agentic system is using all that signal, all that metadata, the scans of the assets, the controls that the observability platform has built up. tons of signal, but now it's going to help me navigate through that. So it's telling me a few things like, hey, here's that particular policy I was looking at. Now I can start asking it, instead of going to my dashboard, very specifically, will show me that policy, its score over time, with the volume of data that it's processing, and suddenly I can see, oh, there was a big spike in data. That wasn't really expected. Not only is it going to visualize that for me, it's going to start giving me insights as to what's going on. But I can continue this conversation, start asking questions, well, what is that testing for? And what's the likely cause of the quality drop, right? So again, instead of me kind of clicking in and seeing all the tests and looking, it can start answering questions for me, telling me what that policy, what those series of controls and tests are about. In this case, in this scenario, it's about like credit card transactions coming in and making sure reversals actually balance the original one. Something our observability platform can help you put controls in place for, and now something the agentic system can help it understand and explain to me what the test is doing. So it's making it very quick for me, a necessarily non-technical user, to get detailed information, including insights into what the likely cause is, including things like, well, these reversal transactions, obviously there's some problem because I got a reversal in yen for an original transaction that was in euros, right? Well, that's a problem. I shouldn't have those reversals flowing like that, right? Now, I may have asked it to tell me what's upstream from this, because I have lineage of the asset because I've monitored the pipeline that's moving all the data. And it can tell me, oh, this thing's upstream. So I can start asking about, well, what's upstream? What policies are there, right? I can ask a similar question, well, what about the quality on that one? And I see this sort of a roller coaster view, right? Again, blue is the score, red's the volume. And I see there's certain days where I'm getting zero volume through this asset, through my pipeline. And well, when I have zero volume, that's sort of a pipeline problem, another track to go down. But I know that a zero volume run will give me a zero score. So I and the scale is pretty wide. So I can ask it a simple question. Again, it's going to give me some insights. Just remove those 0 points from me and give me a different view. Now I've got a very different view of understanding what that pattern is, right? So if you think about what I would have had to do in a dashboard, maybe in my system, a dashboard if you loaded to Tableau to go from looking at a view and start excluding specific data points, to instead letting the agentic system just produce those visualizations for me. And I could say, no, I want it this way, better that way, going through it. You start asking, do I really need to build dashboards? If, as a business user, I could just ask the system to present data to me in a certain way. Again, the observability platform has all this data point, has all this metadata, and I can just ask the agent, present it to me as I want it seen, right? And it's also going to give me, insights into what it thinks the problem is. But I notice this specific drop here. I can ask that follow-up question to say, well, what happened that day? What happened on that run, right? Again, all this data is in the observability platform. I could have clicked through and done my own analysis, but now the agentic system is doing the analysis for me. I can pick up and go from there. Now, a big part of this is, if you look up here, the little circles, I've actually was collaborating. I could collaborate with my colleague. I could say, Cam, start looking at this. Then he's in the same chat with me. He's seeing the same information. He can ask questions of the same conversation. We can collaborate and get to a problem. I can export this, maybe get a couple of those questions and answers exported to a PDF and send it to somebody to say, hey, look at this. Or I can tell it to go ahead and just build me a dashboard of all the questions, bring all that analysis together. I could save all this off into a notebook so I could run it again and again and again, put it on a schedule. If it was a certain series of questions I always wanted to know. Again, I'm right now in a persona like a business user. If I wanted to have this sort of pre-built series of analysis, I probably would have had to ask Cam, my data engineer, to build it for me before, but I can just go and do this myself. Back to the idea of this new world is breaking down the silos, mixing the personas of what one can do versus individuals. Okay, so this part of the agentic system helped me understand and get to analysis of events that have happened very quickly. But another part of the agentic system is around helping me build things, right? A big scenario that I always use LLMs for is, hey, I need a Python program to do a certain thing for me. And I'm just not going to write it. I'm just going to have the LLM write my code and go with it, right? Once it's written, I just use that code. I don't tell it to write it again and again. In this case, I can tell the agentic system to go build some of these controls for me, what we call policies, that may say, hey, this data, all the new data coming in has to meet these criteria, right? We have a lot of ways in the core system to do that. Do it in bulk, do it like from a governance policy. But in this case, I want to be even a little bit more open-ended. I'm going to say, if you look at this prompt, create policies for anti-money laundering testing against assets that are tagged for regulatory reporting, just up in BigQuery, right? Now, I've loaded into our knowledge base documentation to say what's AML testing for us, but our system can understand that or go out and search the web and come up and decide what AML testing should cover, right? So in this case, this workflow has a policy analyzer step, which is the LM going to go and understand what those tests would be. An asset extractor or selection test, again, I said those tag this way, but I could say, hey, get ones that are transaction-based, et cetera. And then a policy generation step where it's actually going to go generate those assets, like I said before, generate my Python program, and then create those for me to approve, right? So in our scenario right now where we talk about being a human in the loop. So it's building these, I can then say, oh, I see what you're setting up, here are all the rules you produced, I like them, I don't like this one, add some more, save it off, and now I have that control, that program I would have told it to write for me, et cetera. This is a very, once I've built that deterministically, it'll keep on running any way I want, but it's going to produce the same output, right? So human in the loop now, as we get more trust and build trust in these agentic systems, we talk about putting a human on the loop, just approving, hey, go put protections on everything that you figured out is PII. And then eventually, I think we'll get to the point of a human over the loop, a very high level supervision and guidance. Some people talk about human out of the loop. I don't like out of the loop, sounds wrong, right? But that's how it's all going to come together, right? So we have these workflows. We're going to give you elemental sets so that you can build your own. We'll do things like, hey, go and build human descriptions for all my controls that already exist. Hey, I need better descriptions on my assets. Hey, I need you to find all the PII data and then tag it as such so I can put better protections on it. All those things will be possible. A few things, I mentioned the knowledge base. We have all this metadata about the catalog, the data quality. We've built these agents that then let the LLMs talk to us so they can understand what metadata we have, right? And then take action and build from there. As well as, we have an MCP server and we can integrate other MCP servers along the way, right? As I said before, there's business notebooks, so I can create these things that I may want to do every day, right? Say, hey, every day scan for new PII that isn't protected. Things like that I can just schedule as a business user and take from there, right? And then get alerted when all these things happen. So again, this all wraps back around to how we use the power of the agentic systems with the huge amount of signal we've collected around through observability about the reliability of your platforms, reliability of your data, the reliability of your pipelines, so that you can, again, get ahead of any issue that you have. I'm going to stop there, give Cam a few minutes back there, and then take a few questions.
Cheers. Thank you, Joe. Okay, so hopefully what you gleaned out of that was the ability to use this agentic data management system to really move through these processes so much faster and so much easier than ever before. As Joe mentioned, the data is all there. That signal is all there. Acceldata is already capturing all of this incredibly valuable information. But using these agents to cut through all of that, to be able to present that back to users in a concise, easily digestible way is really the key here. So you'll see here, just from an overall data observability standpoint, some of the challenges, the solutions, et cetera. I'll summarize this very quickly by saying one of the most common data problems that we see from our customers is the reconciliation from one data source to another. Data has moved from X to Y. Pick your X, pick your Y, it doesn't matter. But when that happens, if there is a drift in schema when those change, when there is data that's missing because of a faulty ETL process, if it's propagated with nulls that weren't supposed to be there, whatever that problem is, the eventual output is that it breaks BI or ML models. It feeds garbage data into whatever your AI systems are expecting to receive. Another very big challenge is missed SLAs. So the receipt of that data as it's coming in from either customers or third parties, without having visibility on when was I supposed to receive that data, when did I receive it, how much was it, et cetera. So being able to put SLAs on the volume and the receipt of that data is very important, as well as just the sheer increase exponentially of the amount, the volume of data that organizations are monitoring. As those data volumes increase, it just becomes increasingly difficult to actually find the signal through all of that noise. So the solution is data observability with the agentic data management, being able to, again, uncover all of that signal, but being able to use agents to be able to glean that information and to present it back in a easily digestible way. So the impact that we're seeing in double-digit impact on a decreased number of pipeline incidents, 30% increase in query performance. These are averages across our customer base. And being able also to significantly reduce the consumption across your cloud warehouses of choice. Okay, so with just a couple of minutes left, if there's any questions, we'll happily take them. And otherwise, we are at Booth M as in Michael 70, which we can actually see right from our booth over here, so it's just a little bit that way. Please, we encourage you to come by our booth, ask any further questions. If you'd like to ask anything specific about your particular use case, we'd be happy to answer that. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.